Okay, I figured I'd show you how I got the Cummins 12 valve in the 1985 F250. So I've got a list here to get the engine in the truck. I ended up doing the diesel conversion specialist's mounts down there and the transmission adapter. I'm using a ZF5 transmission. Even though this is a bullnose, that ZF5 is out of a 88 F250 with the 460. It's personal preference, but I personally like the 460 ratios more than the 7:3 ratios. So that's, like I said, just personal preference. But that gets the engine in the truck mounted to the transmission. I'll cover what else I got from the diesel conversion specialist, but on that list is this manifold. I'm not convinced that you need this particular manifold. I think if you grabbed a third generation 5.9, which is the common rail, it has a very similar turbo location, and I think you could get by without this particular manifold. It's just I already got the mounts and the transmission adapter. I just went ahead and got this, and then the radiator hoses and the tack adapter as well. That's on my list too. The tack adapter is great. I thought about easier solutions. This is an IDI truck, so it had a 53 pulse per revolution. That's what the tack needs to see, and we got there. But the easiest way was just with the tack adapter. For the clutch, this has the this is real important because this saved me a ton of money. But the ZF5 pressure plate will bolt to the 1995 Dodge Cummins manual flywheel with the 12 1/4 clutch. It bolts right on. So that's a huge headache out of the way. I know diesel conversion specialists, it was like $1,000. And I already had the ZF5 with the 6.9, so that saved me a considerable amount of headache. The only issue with that is that the input shaft for the ZF5 is metric. It's 17 millimeters, and the outer diameter of the pilot bearing for the Dodge is inch. It's right at 1.000 inches. So I ended up finding a sleeve that I used to space the space the flywheel dimension down, and I found a needle bearing that fit. Could you do that? Yes, but I got lucky more than anything. There's a scrap yard around here that has lots of little bits and pieces, and I found a bushing that was really close, so I just made that work. But that is something that you could take to a machine shop and have them hone out the inside of the flywheel to accommodate a metric bearing, and those are readily available. People do that on ZF5s all the time, but just any bearing with an internal diameter of 17 millimeters will work. The other thing, and this was a huge headache, but the drive shaft needs to be shortened to 2.5 inches. I was hoping I didn't have to, but there was no way around it. I had Farmers Repair in Whitewater, Kansas do that. I'm in Wichita, but Farmers Repair in Whitewater, Kansas, was a huge help in getting that taken care of. For power steering, again, I tried to do this on a budget. You can kind of see just right behind that return hose. Diesel Conversion Specialist sells a kit with the stem that goes into the Dodge pump and then a 3/8 compression union, and then you're just supposed to attach that to the Ford hose. Since my particular engine was out of a Dodge, I just and the power steering lines were cut, not removed. I just used a tubing cutter and I cut the male end off of the pump side of the power steering hose and spliced that in with just a 3/8 union that I got at O'Reilly's on their little Dorman blister pack in their hardware department. The throttle cable, I went ahead and just used the stock Dodge throttle cable. It works fine. I had to, right where it goes into the hole there, I had to, it's a square peg that had to fit into a round hole, so I had to shave the corners off a little bit, but it fits in there just fine. Fuel lines, I don't know about gas applications, especially EFI, but in my particular case with the diesel, it works out super well. Is the easiest part of the whole swap, because it's a 3/8 supply, 5/16 return on the Cummins, and that's how the Ford was stock. My clutch hydraulics were the same. It didn't matter that the whole engine and transmission were pushed back 2.5 inches. Although one other thing is the cross member has to be moved back to I think right at 2 inches is what I did. It said in the Diesel Conversion Specialists that firewall modification was necessary. I did not find that the case on this particular truck. I can remove this tray and remove all 6 valve covers. It's easiest to get that 6th off if you take the 5 off first, but I can remove all 6, and I didn't have to do any clearancing. The only clearancing I had to do was for the downpipe, right there. I had to beat it up from above in order to get the turbo elbow mounted. For the alternator, there's this little kit down here. This is the stock Dodge alternator, but there's this little kit with this green and orange wire. I got it on eBay. It was $20, and it essentially turns this into a one-wire alternator. So you just need an ignition hot to trigger the field, and then that's it. And that was a huge help, because a self-regulating Dodge alternator is not cheap, and all I did was this, and I'm at 14.4 volts pretty much all the time. So but the stock Ford heater hoses work with the Dodge setup, although the Diesel Conversion Specialist radiator hose, upper radiator hose, is somewhat interfering, but it is what it is. Diesel Conversion also has sensor adapters. I didn't opt for that. I just went to the hardware store and got pipe fittings. It's nothing fancy. It's super easy. Vacuum lines, I'm kind of all over the place, but vacuum lines, I ended up just cutting the T there. I just cut the brake booster line and put a T in. Super easy. Again, something that I'm sure if you're wanting to do this swap, you can figure it out. Air conditioning, I'm pretty proud of this, but I went with the stock Dodge compressor in the stock location. I have the stock Dodge hose. I have a section of my old hose that I bent, and it's a little kinked, but my air conditioning works just fine. Dorman has a union for air conditioning lines. I highly, highly, highly recommend these. I mean, they're great. They don't leak. I've had this system pressured up for 2 weeks, and I haven't lost any pressure. So that's the low pressure side. This is the Dodge hose. This is the Ford hose, and then the Dorman splice in between. The high pressure side was a little bit more. I had to be a little bit more creative, but this is the high pressure from the Dodge pump. I ended up buying this fitting, this length of hose, and this fitting, and a crimper, because coldhose.com makes custom air conditioning hoses. That would probably be the easier way to go, but in my case, I just decided to try my hand at making them, and for the next project, I have the crimper. I can make more. But these, make sure, I had a big mistake. These are female flare fittings, and it's number 6. These are number 6. Male thread, female O-ring to number 8 hose. Maybe that's not right. Maybe these are number 8s. Either way, I bought like 6 fittings and they were all wrong. So, but I finally got it to work, and my air conditioning works like a charm. It's the first time I've had air conditioning in this truck. So that's a huge thing for me. I'm pretty proud of that. But next is the intercooler. Yes, there's an intercooler back here. It was really tricky with this grill. I had to shave quite a bit off, and I shaved a little more than I probably should have, but it is what it is. I will probably get another grill and make it less ugly. But that is a 7.3 Power Stroke intercooler from, I believe, a 2002 F350. I ended up getting this used. Up here, it's mounted just with a bolt and radiator bushing. These bushings are really easy to find online or at radiator shops locally. And then down low, I made these little perches that are just bolted to the core support. And there's a little piece of rubber between the head of this bolt and the core support just for a little isolation. For the intercooler piping, I just got a cheap, I think it was $100 intercooler piping kit off of eBay. Made it work. It's not ideal. I don't love this elbow that goes into another elbow and then into the intercooler, but it is what it is. This side I think is a lot better. It's just the straight 40 or the 135. You do have to remove a significant amount out of your radiator. I mean, I removed like 8 or 9 inches in here on both sides. The core support, same thing. You have to hog out some holes on both sides, but the radiator's solid. It's not going anywhere. I heard online that the 91.5 to 93 Cummins Dodge intercooled, sorry, the 91.5 to 93 Dodge pickup with the Cummins that's intercooled has a different fan that is further away from the radiator and more centrally located. I purchased that, and I'm not sure I really need it. The stock fan was about 3/8 of an inch away from the radiator, which isn't ideal, But this is a 95 motor, so the stock 95 fan was about 3/8 of an inch from the radiator, which, like I said, isn't ideal, but the radiator's pretty solid. I don't think I would have run into any problems. And as expensive as these are, I think if I were to go do it all over again, I would just rock and roll with the stock 95, the stock 95 fan and perch, which, if I'm not mistaken, is the same as the non-air-cooled Cummins engines in Dodge pickups up into, from basically beginning until, I think even the 24 valves use the same fan, but if I'm not mistaken. So, intercooler pipe kit came with all the hoses and clamps and everything. These little rubber splices, everything needed. And then the exhaust, similar thing. It's the stock down pipe. I removed 3.5 inches on the angle going down just to bring the flat section up a little bit. And I'm about 1/2 inch above my cross member, so I shouldn't have any problems there. And then the rest of the exhaust, it's just straight piped. And I have that with I ended up getting that with I think it was $110 exhaust kit on eBay, and it's just a 3-inch exhaust all the way back. I didn't really. This is a stock Cummins engine from a 95 Dodge with the automatic transmission. It's rated at 180. I think it's 185 horsepower, and 400 foot-pounds of torque. The ZF transmission is rated for 420 foot-pounds of torque. So I'm not really wanting to test the integrity of the ZF5 too much. So I'm going to leave it stock, which is why I opted for the 3-inch. This air filter isn't ideal. It's just the Spectra $31 air filter from AutoZone. It's not ideal, I know, to have it behind the radiator, but every cold air intake I could find that was for this application involved either removing the second battery or converting it to dual driver side, which I don't really want to do. I mean, over here, that involves getting rid of these two reservoirs, again, if I'm not mistaken. But it just wasn't something I wanted to give up. So I'm living with this. My EGTs are fine. But the starter for the diesel conversion specialists kit, it says for use with a 6.0 starter. I ended up going with a 6.4 starter. I did a lot of research. Apparently they are identical externally, but the 6.4 starter tends to rev a little higher. And not rev isn't the correct term, but it has a higher RPM, and I opted for that. This is an incredibly well starting engine. It's almost unfair how little you hear the you just touch the key and it fires up. The only other thing that's coming to mind on this swap is the intercooler had to be modified. I had to cut a section of this top plate and mush this top tube down a little bit, and then I had to cut and modify the hood latch in order to get it to function, because the old one hung down about 3 inches. I think you could probably mount the intercooler lower than I did. I liked where the intercooler was at. when I set it in there, and I felt like this was the least amount of work for the best finished result, but I have a considerable amount of room between the intercooler and the condenser, and between the condenser and the radiator. I think I could be a little bit more efficient, and that would mitigate having to trim the grill as much, as well as you probably wouldn't have to modify the hood latch. If you did, you probably wouldn't have to cut it and weld it. And you might even be able to keep that center support that goes from the hood latch down. But it is what it is. I just kind of went into this with not much to expect, and it runs great. I'll show you guys how it goes, but tack works, temp and oil gauge works. My fuel gauge is a little funky, but that's unrelated to the swap. It's a sending unit issue, but no more glow plugs. No more. I mean, this thing doesn't rattle like the IDI did. Has a lot more torque, in my opinion, even just this stock one. I'm very impressed. I would do this 100 times over. I can't recommend this enough. This has changed this truck completely. All right, real quick, this is the next day. I thought of two things that I didn't mention in the video. The first one is how I moved the shifter back. So if you do a ZF5 swap on a bullnose, you are going to need the transmission tunnel for a ZF5 truck. The T19, this section back here isn't as high. It's flat, and then it bumps up. And you need this extra room. So that's why this is outside of the floor mat. I kind of like how it looks, but I cut a plate that was 2 inches longer than than this boot, and was able to fasten those 2 screws into the factory 2 holes, and then I put 4 screws in. It's as close as I could get it to the bullnose 1345 transfer case connector, but right now I need to modify this. It's not perfect. I can go between 2 high and 4 high, but that's it. I'm hitting the hole in the pan because the hole works has been pushed back. So I will probably, there's the 2 bolt holes on the side of the transmission that the transfer case linkage bolts to. I will probably bolt a piece of angle iron to those 2 mounting points and push this pivot point for the shifter 2 inches forward so it's in the factory location, and then lengthen the shift linkage 2 inches. And then the other thing is, under the hood, if you use the DPS exhaust manifold, you will need to modify the wastegate if you were using the stock 12-valve Cummins, the stock 12-valve whole set HX35 turbo. I managed to make mine out of angle iron and just weld it together, but it's probably just easier to spend the $100 and get the wastegate controller from Diesel Conversion Specialists when you place that order, if you place that order. But those are the only 2 things that I didn't mention in the video, and put in the comments if you have any questions. I'd be happy to answer. Thanks.